June 4th, 1942. 240 miles northwest of Midway. Wade McCluskey's fuel gauge read 0. Below him, 20,000 square miles of empty Pacific Ocean. Behind him, 32 dive bombers burning their last gallons of fuel. In 15 minutes, every aircraft in his squadron would ditch in the ocean and his pilots would drown. Then he saw it. A single white wake cutting across blue water. One Japanese destroyer racing northeast. McCluskey made a decision that defied every tactical manual. Follow that ship with empty tanks. 6 minutes later, his pilots saw what no American had seen and survived. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in perfect formation, decks packed with fully armed bombers, fuel hoses stretched across wooden planks, and not a single fighter above them. The Japanese fleet was completely naked. What happened in the next 5 minutes would destroy 268 aircraft, kill 121 irreplaceable pilots, and end 6 months of Japanese dominance in 300 seconds of dive bombing. Before we dive into those 5 minutes that changed naval warfare forever, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss these untold stories from World War II. And a quick question, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. Tell me where you're joining us from today. The Japanese sailors on Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu had no reason to fear American dive bombers. Pearl Harbor, 2,403 Americans dead, 8 battleships destroyed, 0 Japanese carriers touched. Indian Ocean, British carriers Hermes and Cornwall sunk without Japanese loss. Coral Sea, Lexington destroyed, Yorktown crippled, only light carrier Shoho lost. 6 months, 5 major operations, 5 victories. Against this record, for carriers approaching Midway represented an unstoppable force executing what Japanese planners considered a flawless trap. Admiral Yamamoto's plan was surgically precise. Lure America's remaining carriers to defend Midway. Destroy them with overwhelming force. Eliminate the last obstacle to Japanese Pacific dominance. The operation deployed 8 carriers, 11 battleships, 23 cruisers, and 350 aircraft. Japanese intelligence estimated 3 American carriers remained operational. Yamamoto believed he outnumbered any response 3-1. His 280 carrier aircraft were flown by veterans, averaging 1,000 combat hours. The youngest had more combat experience than most American squadron commanders. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. American forces were walking into a slaughter designed specifically for them. They were wrong about the numbers. Station Hypo in Hawaii had cracked JN 25, the Japanese naval code. Commander Joseph Rockefeller's codebreakers knew the target, the date, and the forces involved. Admiral Nimitz positioned Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown northeast of Midway in a calculated ambush. The Japanese sailed toward what they believed was their trap. They were sailing into one set for them. But Nimitz's advantage was razor-thin. His 233 carrier aircraft faced 280 Japanese planes. His pilots averaged 200 total flight hours. Half had never dropped a bomb in combat. If this became a conventional carrier battle, the mathematics favored Japan catastrophically. American carriers needed more than intelligence. They needed perfect execution. At 10:22 a.m. on June 4th, execution arrived in the form of 33 dive bombers that were supposed to be 200 miles away preparing to ditch. The morning had been a bloodbath. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet found the carriers at 9:20 a.m. 15 Douglas TBD Devastators attacked, without fighter escort. All 15 were shot down. 0 hits. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise followed at 9:40 a.m. 14 planes attacked. 10 were destroyed. 0 hits. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown arrived at 10 a.m. 12 aircraft pressed attacks against impossible odds. 10 were shot down. 0 hits. In 40 minutes, 41 American torpedo bombers died, achieving nothing. Japanese carriers maneuvered freely. Their fighters controlled the sky at sea level. The attack was failing completely. Then McCluskey's lost dive bombers found the fleet. McCluskey had launched from Enterprise at 7:52 a.m., calculated an intercept, and found empty ocean. His air group commander, Ring, had led Hornet's aircraft on a different heading. They'd find nothing and ditch. McCluskey made the choice that separated him from Ring: extend the search southwest. At 10:05 a.m., fuel gauges reading fumes, he spotted the destroyer Arisher racing northeast. The destroyer had been depth-charging submarine Nautilus and was rushing to rejoin the fleet. McCluskey followed. At 10:22 a.m., his pilots saw 4 carriers in neat formation. Akagi and Kaga to port, Soryu and Hiryu to starboard. Every deck was packed with aircraft being armed and fueled. The scene below was a weapons handler's nightmare. Bombs and torpedoes lay beside aircraft. Fuel lines stretched across wooden decks. Ordnance crews worked frantically to rearm 100-plus aircraft simultaneously. Japanese doctrine demanded speed, launch before American carriers could attack. That doctrine required rearming on the flight deck instead of protected hangars. At 10:22 a.m., that doctrine became fatal. Every Japanese fighter was at sea level. The torpedo attacks had pulled them down. The carriers had zero high-altitude cover. McCluskey's 33 dive bombers owned 14,000 feet of sky with no opposition. He split his force instantly. Bombing 6 would take Kaga. He'd take Akagi personally. Bombing 3 from Yorktown arrived by coincidence seconds later. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie assigned his 17 bombers to Soryu. 3 carrier squadrons had accidentally converged. The Japanese had no warning. McCluskey's bombers rolled into their dives at 10:24 a.m. Japanese lookouts screamed warnings. Crews abandoned rearming procedures and ran. Anti-aircraft guns swung skyward. 30 seconds too late. Lieutenant Dick Best's 1,000-pound bomb hit Akagi near the aft elevator at 10:26 a.m. The explosion penetrated to the hangar deck and detonated armed aircraft. Fuel ignited. Torpedoes cooked off. Within 90 seconds, Akagi's entire hangar deck was an inferno. On Kaga, 4 bombs struck within 2 minutes. The forward elevator was blown 400 feet into the air. Aviation fuel from ruptured lines turned the ship into a floating furnace visible for 30 miles. On Soryu, 3 bombs penetrated to the hangar deck in rapid succession. The first wave of aircraft, fully fueled, fully armed, exploded simultaneously. The blast gutted the forward third of the ship. Crews couldn't reach firefighting equipment through walls of flame. By 10:28 a.m., 5 minutes after McCluskey's first bomb fell, 3 Japanese carriers were burning beyond control. They were finished as fighting units. Hiryu survived by chance. Separated by 8,000 yards, she escaped McCluskey's attention. Her aircraft launched at 10:40 a.m. and crippled Yorktown by 2:30 p.m. But Yorktown scouts found Hiryu at 2:45 p.m. Enterprise's dive bombers struck at 5 p.m. with 4 direct hits. Hiryu burned through the night and sank at 9 a.m. on June 5th. For Japanese carriers. For American strikes. For catastrophic losses. If McCluskey had flown 5 more minutes on his original heading, fuel exhaustion would have forced him back. If the torpedo attacks had come 10 minutes earlier or later, Japanese fighters would have been at altitude. If Japanese doctrine had demanded rearming in armored hangars, the bombs would have been survivable. The convergence required every variable to align within minutes. Change any single factor, and the outcome reverses. The human cost was absolute. Captain Aoki burned to death on Akagi's bridge. Kaga's crew suffered 800 casualties in the first hour. Soryu's survivors abandoned ship at 10:45 a.m., 19 minutes after the attack began. Each carrier bore 70 to 90 aircraft and irreplaceable pilots who'd conquered the Pacific for 6 months. Of 280 aircraft on those 4 carriers, 268 were destroyed or abandoned. Of the elite pilots who'd bombed Pearl Harbor and dominated Coral Sea, 121 died. Japan had started the war with approximately 400 frontline carrier pilots. Midway killed 30% in a single morning. The industrial reality was more brutal. Japan's economy could build perhaps 2 fleet carriers per year at maximum capacity. America was already producing Essex-class carriers at 1 every 90 days. 4 carriers burning northwest of Midway represented 2 years of Japanese industrial output destroyed in 5 minutes. America would replace Yorktown within 4 months. Japan would spend 2 years building Taiho to replace Akagi. By the time Taiho launched in 1944, America had commissioned 17 Essex-class carriers. Admiral Yamamoto received the reports aboard super battleship Yamato 300 miles northwest. At 11:30 a.m., he ordered the invasion force to withdraw. The operation designed to eliminate American carrier power had instead eliminated Japanese naval aviation as an offensive force. His carriers had been invincible for 6 months. They'd lasted 5 minutes under attack. After Midway, Japanese carriers would never again achieve the concentration of force they'd wielded in December 1941. After Midway, American carriers would never again retreat before Japanese naval power. The industrial mobilization that would bury Japan under 147 carriers by August 1945 had already begun. But at 10:22 a.m. on June 4, 1942, the war could still go either way. The Pacific War turned on one lieutenant commander following a single destroyer, arriving at the exact instant 4 carriers were fatally vulnerable. 5 minutes of perfect timing. 5 minutes that couldn't be engineered. 5 minutes that decided the ocean. So, what did you think about those 5 minutes at Midway? Did this change how you see the role of timing versus strategy in warfare? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like. It helps more history enthusiasts discover these untold perspectives. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the moments that shaped World War II. There are so many more stories like this waiting to be told.